The new form of capitalism has transformed the ecology of intimate relationships, changed the subjugated position of women, and created a multitude of experiences devoid of love. Pleasure has become the true desire pattern of a consumer society. However, it cannot genuinely constitute loving and cohesive individuals. Freedom has allowed virtual capitalism to control our actions and imagination, while the psychotherapy industry soothes our emotion wounds and psychological fractures. Hello everyone, this is Darren, who reads without seeking deep understanding. Welcome to this episode of Reading Memo. The book we are going to read today is The End of Love by French sociologist Eva Eloise, a sociological exploration of negative relationships. Our society has infinite manifestation when it comes to the level of love. However, there has always been a lack of social types describing non-love. Non-love represents the disintegration of social relationships, and this disintegration is closely related to the increase in social networks, the wideness of technology and the economy, and the psychotherapy industry. Capitalist markets and consumer culture compel individuals to treat their subjective experience as the only true and tangible existence, guiding their actions based on various forms of autonomy, freedom, and pleasure. This book aims to understand how the intersection of capitalism, sexuality, gender relationships, and technology has generated a new form of relationship or non-relationship. It discusses whether freedom has undermined the potential for romantic relationship to form. Historically, love often emerged from the theme of fighting for freedom. The struggle for individual emotional freedom was led by social pioneers and ordinary men and women, and this struggle propelled the process of social transformation in mate selection, including the germination of political aspirations. The right to choose our loved ones gradually evolved into a power of autonomous control. The freedom of emotion and bodies signifies a transition to emotional modernity. Regarding this freedom, we cannot help but ask where does the disconnection between freedom and normativity lie? Here we introduce a concept, negative freedom. As long as individuals do not harm others or impede others' freedom, they can engage in any action without internal obstacles. The abstract nature of negative freedom creates a space easily colonized by modern social capitalist systems and cultures. Marx said freedom inherently contains the risk of allowing inequality to flourish. Our freedom is primarily present through choices. Faced with a multitude of possibilities, individuals make decisions through choices. Capitalism has transformed many realms of social life into markets, making choices an important social form. Modern individuals understand and realize themselves through selection. We, as modern individuals, grew and matured through such reflective behavior. Making choices is positive freedom, but negative choices, those made under the pretext of freedom and self-realization, rejecting, avoiding, or withdrawing from the relationship we face, are often overlooked. Negative choices are a self-affirmative freedom, self-affirmation through negation and disregard of others. The core imagination of capitalist subjective has changed the moral imperative of our society. It demands that we be autonomous, become better, and maximize the productivity of pleasure. It is precisely this kind of demand that shapes the negative choices. No fault divorce, contraceptive products, consumer markets, and social networks has made negative choices possible. First, let's review how our relationships used to function in the past. There are two sides of grammars for social bonds and emotional choices. Desires originated from subjectivities drifting freely with no endpoint. Desires are organized through external factors such as economic interest, marital norms, gender roles, and so on. Before the 1970s, courtship was the dominant mode of romantic interaction between men and women. This was because sex was in a constrained position. Christianity turned sex into a problem of temptation and a sin in people's heart. However, the church gradually realized that it could not demand everyone to remain celibate and pure. So it began to compromise by using marriage, a system that inherently promotes self-control and set requirements for marriage to define the boundaries of acceptable sexual relationships. Sexual behavior has always been constrained, often requiring adherence to explicit moral and social rules demanded by courtship. Per-modern courtship provided certainty by making the future a predetermined outcome based on a set of explicit rules. Courtship had ritual features that included shared rules, which reinforced and defined people's emotion, reducing ambiguity. If the actor focused on emotional expression, it would make the interaction more uncertain. Love itself could not generate certainty without a social structure that could create it. The decline of courtship was due to the emergence of sexual freedom. Starting in the 19th century, powerful economic and cultural forces changed the meaning of sex. The science of sex transformed it into a biological drive, meaning that it was natural and not tainted by original sin. With the expansion of urbanization and the rise of consumer leisure, sex became a form of entertainment. It was pursued for pleasure rather than reproduction, exploring and fulfilling one's unrepressed self in various consumer settings. Sex became an essential attribute of a liberated and healthy self, freed from the shackles of social norms. The visual industry converted images of beautiful bodies, provided leisure consumer venues for dating, and other consumer cultures that transformed sex into a commodity that people consumed to achieve their own happiness. The reason sexual freedom permeated consumer behaviors is because feminists, advocates of sexual liberation, and sexual minority groups had two demands for sex: equality and freedom. Sex became a project with political and moral significance, becoming a form of self-identity. A liberated, empowered, and positive woman is free and comfortable in her own body and sexuality, and this image is equality with power and sexuality through consumer goods. Sexual freedom became an attribute of independent individuals, stripping away the ceremonial attributes of sexual interaction and imbuing it with uncertainty and negative social aspects. Sexual freedom became a universal cultural structure because of its close relationship with the economic sphere. The foundation of industrial capitalism was the factory and the family. After the 1960s, the new form of capitalism fundamentally became diffuse, and the social pillars of economic production were no longer the family, but rather individuals as workers and consumers. Sex became a consumer practice, resulting in cultural sex that is fundamentally different from stable relationships. Cultural sex is a strictly complete form of individual expression that takes the form of a commodity. It revolves around pleasure, self-referentiality, and the interaction itself as its goal. As a social form, the characteristic of culture sex is to erase the uniqueness of the partner through symbolic strategies. Culture sex excites people because it affirms individual freedom and desires. However, it eliminates the possibility of forming reciprocal relationships. One with the pleasure brought by such interaction is precisely because they don't involve oneself and don't require reciprocity. George Samuel said money is abstract because it makes commodities subordinated to their exchange value, making them interchangeable. In culture sex, people become like commodities, things that can be exchanged on an equivalent basis, and people's sexual pleasure becomes the currency. The abstracted aspect of people is reduced to the function of pleasure. The abstracted aspect of people is reduced to the function of pleasure. Culture sex is often associated with a male form of sexual connection. Historically, men have enjoyed more sexual freedom, so the emotional detachment that comes with culture sex also aligns with the ideals of masculinity. If someone says culture sex as a symbol of feminist politics, it is because they are imitating male privilege, the autonomy of the individual, which represents the ability to pursue one's own pleasure without the traditional expectation of care and reciprocity associated with femininity. In that sense, culture sex can be seen as a symbol of equality for women. The direct consequence of culture sex is the formation of uncertainty. This uncertainty can have a direct impact on one's psychology, such as shame, anxiety, and insecurity. Traditional courtship and dating heavily rely on established scripts in both thought and practice. Modern culture sex disrupts the script of a romantic relationship because sex used to signify the end of a courtship narrative, whereas now it is often placed at the beginning of the story, making the goals of the relationship uncertain. The sexualization of relationships implies that entering into a relationship starts with sex, and perhaps this starting point is also the end point of the relationship. Regardless of gender, there is a strong correlation between low self-esteem and cultural sex. Engaging in cultural sex does not enhance one's sense of self-worth, even if it has become a form of capital pursued by both sexes for pleasure or social status. Culture sex creates a conflict between relationality and bodily autonomy for women. Women's social existence is still largely defined by their relational roles, as they continue to bear the majority of caregiving responsibilities in society. Negative relationships often emerge from the uncertainty. In negative relationships, the goals are vague, undefined, or contentious, and there are no established rules for commitment or separation. Additionally, there is rarely any punishment for ending such relationships. In negative relationships, individuals have to confront the ambiguity of their own action and struggle to understand their meaning. Meanwhile, people seek psychological certainties through their rules and norms of sexual liberty and pleasure-driven culture. However, as Freud argued, pleasure comes from masculine stimulation, and when individuals are unable to control external circumstances or when the stimulation threatens their sense of self, pain emerges. There are three processes that contribute to the uncertainty in individuals' experience: value generation, value evaluation, and value depreciation. These processes are influenced by consumer markets, internet technology, and media tools, and they mutually shape one another. First of all, we need to clarify what value we generate. It is the value of our bodies. In societies where women lack social and economic power, they use their sexuality to exchange for the power bestowed upon them by men. The economical value of women's body lies in the fact that they have been transformed into individual units that can be traded. Starting from the 20th century, mass media and the fashion and beauty industry complex have been promoting image of beautiful and fashionable women on an unprecedented scale. Appearance is an asset that circulates in the image economy and can be traded. Sex appeal is a result of sexuality as a commodity form and self as a new ideology. Sex appeal is more democratized than beauty because many more people can achieve sex appeal, whether they are handsome or unattractive. Sex appeal is not innate beauty but the result of self-recreation, making consumption a permanent characteristic of self-experience. Through consumer goods, sexual identity is intrinsically inscribed in the aesthetication process of daily experience. A sexual attractive body is the cornerstone of consumer culture. High-end service personnel, for example, must possess attractive appearance and erotic capital. Sex can be attributed to the immaterial level. People start to manage their own image, a management similar to the personal branding marketing. Another way to produce value through sexuality is through the visual industry. In advertising, the film industry, as well as the film economy created by the internet platform and social media, sexuality as an image is consumed by people. This visual capitalism, through the spectacle of the body and sexuality, transforms them into images that circulate in different markets, creating enormous value. In the social and economic structure organized by consumer capitalism, women's bodies are no longer confined to the family but have undergone a process of widespread commodification, circulating in the markets of sexuality, economy, and marriage. This also explains the paradoxical nature of the social existence of contemporary women. Although feminism has gained strength and legitimacy, women are once again assigned to the relationship where their sexual body are subject to the economic domination. Value evaluation is mainly expanded into social networks through the patterns of liking and sharing. Visual evaluation has three attributes: high speed, one way, and binary. Value evaluation also plays a role in offline social interactions. Encounters with potential partners are like interviews, and they are exams with only pass or fail results. Although those interviewers may not always have a clear understanding of their own preferences, they always know clearly what they don't want. Consumer goods and consumption practice plays a significant role in the formation of intimacy. People choose whether to fall in love based on similar tastes. Consumer preference and value evaluations even constitute the desire itself. Commodities have become transactional individuals that organize the eternal world and the internal self. Being objectified means interacting with others in a way that diminishes their value, self-sexualization as a commodity. Objectification brings pleasure and empowerment to women because it allows them to produce income and symbolic value through their bodies. The evaluation of other sexual attractiveness is heavily influenced by consumer goods, which can directly eliminate certain individuals. However, when the initial visual configurations and spectacles that create sexual attractiveness disappear, a person's attractiveness becomes easily problematical. Sexual attractiveness is equated with fashion, youth, and constantly changing appearance, and the entire economy of visual attractiveness relies on this constant change. The field of sexuality is formed through elimination, which is an important aspect of capitalist economy. The more influence the women place on their sexual attractiveness, the more difficult it becomes for them to be satisfied with their bodies and their overall selves. People develop themselves through the fragmentation of their bodies and the refinement of taste. Karl Marx predicts that exchange value would become more important than the use value. When there are abundant choices, both objects and people become easily replaceable. The abundance of choices hinders our recognition of others, making it difficult for us to see others as complete selves and appreciate their uniqueness. In interpersonal interactions, if the self cannot recognize others, it will trigger ontological uncertainty, which not only concerns the values of self, but also undermines the essence of the self. The self is constantly subject to the evaluation, and the value of both the self and others is uncertain. The experience of sexualization is both empowering and objectifying. It empowers the individual because it activates the mechanism of value generation, but at the same time, it creates a profound ontological uncertainty within the self and its value. The process of subjectification of objectification have become increasingly intertwined and inseparable. The most important moral principle for freedom is contractualism. Through contracts, agents can represent the freedom of others and articulate their own goals. However, in a free and modern pattern of intimate relationships, the question arises, can contracts, a social form that is institutionalized and continuously improved in the domains of law and economies, truly be transferred to the interpersonal self without compromising the essential nature of intimacy? Stable intentions are a prerequisite for establishing contracts. Sexual freedom demands that individuals present and ensure their own value, which paradoxically undermines the possibility of forming and maintaining contracts. In purely relational contexts, people can easily withdraw, but this is not the case with economic or legal contracts, because violating them often incurs penalties, which serve as constraints on both parties. The metaphor of contracts is insufficient to fully grasp the forms of relationships that lack regulation, restrictions, and punishments in a free and open sexual market. Without the constraints of contracts, the rules in relationships become chaotic. A sexualized culture defines individuals based on their willingness to engage in sexual relationships, using sexual appeal and performance as a standard of value. This diminishes the legitimacy and attractiveness of non-sexual wills for both and self and others. A culture that defines value based on sexual discourse and male rights exerts a pervasive influence on everyone, greatly diminishing the legitimacy or attractiveness of non-sexual wills. A culture of cultural sex, defined by nonchalance, spontaneity, emotional detachment, and the lack of clear meaning frameworks, emphasizing sexual ability and performance, makes sex also culture and without thought. Sexual freedom, which was achieved through long struggles, has turned into a form that oppresses women and makes it difficult for them to breathe freely. The ambiguity of emotion brings about dual uncertainty because emotions are highly interactive and reciprocal. In other words, people react to the emotion expressed by others. In modern relationships, there is a dilemma of uncertainty. Expressing too much interest signifies weakness, while expressing too little prevents meaningful intimate interactions. In relationships, not showing a lack of love or being clingy has become a crucial theme. One must first demonstrate a certain degree of emotional detachment towards other people, as it signifies autonomy and expresses one's value. However, emotional detachment often implies that the other person has adopted a self-protective strategy. In a culture governed by the idea of autonomy, being clingy and locking love is the ultimate devaluation of others. Within this uncertain framework, the self turns inward and relies on internal feelings and self-worth. Both parties affirm their own selves and view the infancy of the other as a threat to themselves. Two selves engage in a zero-sum game, where the value of one self comes at the expense of sacrificing the other's value. Psychotherapy emphasizes enhancing self-worth, requiring us to have self-respect, self-love, self-acceptance. It subtly encourages people to adopt a defensive strategy to protect their own sense of worth. People desire to maintain their autonomy and self-worth while also seeking attachment to others. Withdrawal and breaking up seems to be the only solutions. People tend to choose withdrawal over making appeals because it does not incur punishment and there are many alternative choices. Additionally, people perceive appeals as a threat to individual autonomy. When making an appeal, one expresses vulnerability and dependence on the other person, while withdrawal is a performative expression of self-affirmation. Economics has an assumption that the decline and losses of business are not significant concerns because they may lead to better overall social resource allocation. Having moral indifferences toward breakups seems to follow this logic, believing that the unseen force in the market optimizes efficiency. The breakdown of relationship has become a fundamental part of the culture. To move from a breakup to a new relationship, one needs to forget the past and renew oneself to face the unknown world. When choosing a partner, people make a relatively safe investment to reduce cost and risk and maintain their own value. They outsource different selves and needs to different partners and simultaneously manage multiple relationships to expand their assets, making trust a scarce commodity. In the financial field, people have created many tools to mitigate risk, such as financial derivatives. However, in romantic and sexual interactions, individuals are expected to deal with uncertainty with their emotional attitudes without any insurance or financial tools to ensure stability. Trust is built step by step in a relationship through the gradual increase of investment from both parties. The norms of freedom make it difficult for people to determine whether they should reciprocate, to what extent, and how to reciprocate. Trust is willingness to expose vulnerability to the other person, indicating that trust reaches its highest level when the self is willing to let go of defenses. However, vulnerability can be interpreted as lack of love or being clingy, which is heavily discouraged in contemporary emotional grammar. The primary function of trust is to reduce the complexity of society. Trust helps people establish relationships that are predictable, orderly, and with lower complexity. The disorder and fearfulness of contemporary relationships stem from the collapse of a mechanism for building trust. The absence of trust leads to the disappearance of the narrative and idealization in love. Temporary workers may initially enjoy the unstructured and mobile lifestyle, but they quickly grew tired of this unstable state and start craving job security above all else. Immersion in a social structure becomes more important than personal mobility. Successful sales managers in romantic relationships are either individuals who face little uncertainty or those who know how to overcome their aversion to uncertainty. The modern self is trapped between the demands of capitalism for autonomy and our romantic fantasy of enduring monogamous relationships. Divorce is the institutionalized form and ultimate expression of not loving. Divorce involves a legal system that punishes the party at fault. The form of withdrawal from relationships, divorce, and cultural sex lie at the opposite ends of this spectrum. The increasing employment rates among women and the rising job instability among men are significant factors contributing to the increasing divorce rates. In the early stage of entering a relationship, women are more willing than men to engage in emotional interactions, and because they are more focused on emotions, they are more likely to initiate the termination of the relationship. Sexual bodies become a facade of autonomy, a place where people's deepest and most authentic emotions reside. The majority of divorced or separated individuals consider no longer having sex as a profound change, indicating that sex is a powerful way of organizing intimate and separative narratives. Capitalism turns sex into a spectacle, continuously flowing towards spectators and receivers, reaching a broader audience regarding the culture of sex. The domain of work influenced by capitalism affects people's sexual drives, as work-related stress diminishes sexual desire. Change in the work domain, such as increased pressure, longer working hours, and job uncertainty, may be the reason why people lean towards casual sex and experience a decrease in sexual activity. Lack of time is a factor. Formal relationships require too much time investment, so women prefer to invest their pressure time in themselves, become fully engaged and competitive members of the market. The self faces increasing pressure and must defend itself through consumer tastes. One consequence of the vast array of consumer choices and their combination is the encouragement of consumers to develop highly specific tastes. Social actors, in a pattern of continuous renewal, improvement, and change, experience their consumed selves. The objects of consumption and the practice of consumption constitute the main part of self-narratives, specifically the refinement of taste. Once one party's subjective progress through the cultivation of new tastes, they perceive a mismatch between their emotional and psychological worlds. In the capitalist market, individuals need to constantly demonstrate their independence, indirected uniqueness, and the ability to sustain focus on their own goals and interests, disregarding others' goals and interests as a means of confirming their autonomy. Modern business increasingly demand workers to invest more working hours, which reinforce individuals' assertion of autonomy, particularly among men. Psychotherapy enhances individuals' self-worth, perception of their emotional states, and facilitates the release of suppressed needs and emotions, which subtly influence intimate relationships. People mobilize intimate relationships to define their subjective value, and divorce is the highest form of choice in this regard. Divorce is no longer the agonizing pain experienced by many, but rather an alluring symbol representing freedom, a freedom carefully carved for us by the modernity of science, technology, psychotherapy, and consumption. The body is a key dimension of social existence. The body is the site where social existence realizes itself. While freedom brings independence and rationality to human beings, it also traps them in an isolated state separated from others, leading to feelings of anxiety and powerlessness. The entirety of freedom comes from being compelled to self-realize. The normative idea of freedom has shifted from freely realizing one's plan and definition of a good life to a negative relationship shaped by consumerism and technology. Sexual agents are similar to economic agents, as they possess a keen awareness of competition and develop self-sufficiency skills and general instability in their dealings. Virtual capitalism, where using values such as freedom and liberation, creates new social hierarchies and privileges, transforming and even strengthening traditional modes of male domination over women. Sexual hierarchies, like social or cultural hierarchies, are maintained through process of differentiation. Class differentiation involves cultural objects and consumer practice, while sexual differentiation involves people and directly affects their sense of worth. Exercising the freedom to reject others creates a new social groups and makes the devaluation of self-worth their daily experience. The sexualization of women's identity has not been accompanied by a genuine distribution of social and economic rights. In fact, it has even strengthened male sexual power over women, increasing the appeal of traditional patriarchy. Under the influence of freedom, experience of uncertainty, devaluation of worth, and emptiness become more prevalent and justified. This book aims to explore the ambiguity and contradictions embodied in various cultural practices. At the same time, it strives to resist the knee-jerk reflex of endorsing or condemning freedom upon hearing the term. It also challenges the cognitive hegemony of psychology in the realm of emotions. This book does not advocate a return to family values or communal communities, nor does it call for a reduction of human freedom. If freedom truly means something, its meaning must necessarily include our awareness of the hidden forces that bind and deceive us. The video ends here. There is a small quiz that summarizes the essence of this episode. Please answer it as you see fit. The answers will be reviewed in the next episode. The author begins by examining the phenomenon of not loving and analyzes the formation of intimate relationships in modernity, drawing analogies to various economic forms in capitalism, and explaining how today's sexual freedom is manipulated by capitalism. This book is not a teaching on methodology, but an analytical work that seeks to trace the origins. Once again, reiterates the final viewpoint. If freedom truly means something, its meaning must necessarily include our awareness of the hidden forces that bind and deceive us. Thanks for watching. This is Darren. See you next time.